Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, I'm your host. I'm also the founder of stelliumastrology.com. I am the former horoscope columnist of Elle Magazine UK, and I'm also a tutor at the London School of Astrology. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the Zodiac sign Scorpio. But before I get going, I just wanted to say thank you to Fire Fairy for my lovely review on iTunes, saying, "I absolutely love this podcast. I've learned so much so far and can't wait for the next. The information is down to earth, making it accessible to the layperson. I've become so interested in astrology as a result of listening that I'm looking into courses to learn a more advanced level. I wish I knew years ago that astrology can empower you and help your days be better. Thank you for making astrology easy to understand." You're so welcome, Fire Fairy. That really always makes my day to receive great reviews like that. I got another 5-star review from Catman51, which says, "Love this podcast. Stephanie is very funny and likeable." Thank you. That's really nice of you to say so. So I'm really, really pleased to receive such lovely reviews. And also, I got feedback from the last episode from Cara, who we've spoken about, I think, in the Cardinal episode, and we also spoke about her in the Libra episode, because she has a big Libra stellium. And she got back to me and she sent me quite a long message, which I won't read the entire message, but she wanted to just get in touch to say how much it resonated with her. I think she says, "I just listened to your Libra episode and you asked me to get back to you. I really resonated with everything you said." And she listed about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, about 15 points where she resonated with what I said. And she said, "So another great interpretation. Look forward to hearing about Scorpio." So thank you so much, Cara, for getting back to me. And I've now figured out who it was that mentioned me, and it was Cara who put my name down in a Facebook group about for the other podcast that she was talking about, which now I can't remember what the other podcast was called, but it's an Australian podcast where they talk about astrology, and it's great. I've listened to it and it's actually really, really fun and really enjoyable. Oh gosh, what's the name of the podcast now? That's so annoying, and now you're all going to contact me with the name of the podcast. But anyway, yeah, so that was that. I just wanted to say thank you. And I also wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to my American friends. This episode will be released on Thanksgiving. And I never really I wasn't really into Thanksgiving until I travelled to New York about 2 years ago. We went to New York, me and my boyfriend, and we had the best holiday I think I've ever had in my life. It was so incredible. We went over there for Thanksgiving, and we absolutely had 2 amazing weeks in New York, and I would absolutely love to go back. We were talking about going back this year, and I said to him, I don't think it's a good time to travel. I was also asked to travel to India this year to do another presentation at the Indian conference that I did back in when did I go to that conference? I think it was 2018, early 2018. I think I went to New York and India in the same year. Gosh, that was my jet-setting year. I said to the people organising the conference, I was like, there's a massive Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It's happening quite close to my sun. And to be honest with you, I just think based on those transits, I'm going to give it a miss. And I'm so glad I did. I saved myself a lot of money, a lot of stress, because I looked at the astrology and I thought that year's not going to be a good one for me. And probably not for a lot of people, because the transits that were happening this year, Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto all getting together in Capricorn, and they all happen to be around my sun. But that big kind of thing happening literally only happens like once every 735 years. And I was looking at that going, pretty sure something big's going to happen this year. And I wasn't wrong. So, yeah, that's why I didn't go back to India. That's why I'm not back in New York, which is something me and my boyfriend were saying we'd love to do. And at the beginning of the year, he was like, let's go to New York. And I was like, I just don't see it happening this year. I think we should leave it. I think we should plan it for a better time. And I'm so glad that we haven't, we didn't plan anything for this year, really. I kind of left this year as open as I could. That's if you can't always get it spot on, Because I mean, to think that some people were organising an astrology conference for this year, for some people that's just business and they have to provide that service every year or every couple of years. But I don't have to take part. And that's why I sort of took, astrology can be useful for knowing when it's a good time for you or when it's not. So yeah, that was a bit of a digression. But yeah, that's why I didn't end up coming back to New York. But when I did go to New York, I went during my Jupiter return, which I will talk about probably a bit more maybe next episode when we talk about Sagittarius, who is a great, fun-loving, globe-trotting sign of the Zodiac. But today we're not talking about Sag, we are talking about Scorpio. So to get into Scorpio is a passive sign, so a bit feminine, and that's kind of more introverted, introspective perhaps, not so I don't know, out there, not so, I mean, I'm not saying Scorpio isn't a bold sign and they're not like confident and things like that, but they're definitely a much more feminine, much more introverted, passive sign. And the glyph for Scorpio is the letter M with a little flick and an arrow coming off of the edge of the last bit of the last leg of the M. So it's a bit like a scorpion's tail, and the way it flicks out, it's almost like it's a bit sharp, like if you were to touch it, if you try to put your hand near it, it could like angle that little arrow anywhere and give you a little prick on your finger, as to say, get back, I'm not friendly. So I'm not saying that Scorpio isn't friendly, but Scorpio is definitely a sign that is very selective about who it allows close to it and who it doesn't. We'll probably get into that a bit later. The element for Scorpio is water and the mode is fixed. So if you think about back to the elements and modes episodes, and if you haven't listened, I strongly recommend you do, because the modes and the elements are really the building blocks, and they can allow you to travel so deep into a sign that you could just talk about the element and the mode, and that would give you almost enough. You wouldn't even have to know a lot about astrology. For example, so Scorpio is a fixed water sign. What happens when we fix water? Well, water doesn't fix naturally, does it? It's not a sign that if you've got a glass of water, it doesn't, it's not solid. But if you freeze water, then it's solid. So water is you can change the state of water. And in this state, in the fixed water state, we've got ice. And ice there's a few things that we know about ice. Ice is solid. It's not that it's impenetrable, but it's much harder to penetrate than water. If you think about icebergs, they don't really, they're quite solid, and though they may float about in a larger body of water, generally they tend to be almost quite immovable. You can melt ice, but it takes a while depending on the size of the ice. Sometimes it melts quite quickly. But if you think about that in somebody's kind of way of being, ice being maybe a bit of an ice queen, perhaps. Somebody could be described as an ice queen. Or maybe they are, difficult to warm up. You kind of get a sense of like, oh, they're a bit cold. They're a bit boundaried. You can't really get through to that person emotionally because they're protecting themselves so much. And that's the thing with the fixed signs. They tend to be very loyal. If you think about fixity, it's around for a long time. It generally tends to be quite consistent. And the thing about when the sun dips into Scorpio, it is hang on a sec, got a cat behind me. What are you doing? Hello, you all right? Archer's here. Hello, hear me talking about Scorpio? What was I saying about fixed signs? Yes, so the sun has dipped into what we would consider to be the underworld at the moment. So this is the point in the year where the sun goes into as this episode comes out, it is Sagittarius season, so we will have just come out of the underworld. However, when the sun is in Scorpio, it's considered to dip into the underworld. We have things like Halloween during the Scorpio season, and it's a time of year where the veil is thin between the living and the dead. That's definitely what Halloween means for a lot of people. And it's where we are very aware of suddenly the seasonal shift between the summer and the winter. So we're very much in the throes of the autumn months. In fact, with Scorpio season, I think we cross over the autumn equinox point in Libra, between Libra and Scorpio, and it's at that point that we notice the decay. We notice that the days are shorter in the northern hemisphere. The leaves are orange. It's definitely a time where we start to wrap up a bit more, but it's still cool enough that you don't have to wrap up too much. And you start noticing that the trees are losing their leaves, and though it's sad because that kind of sparse scarcity of winter is quite barren, and it feels very bare and exposed and almost empty in a way. The journey between the living and the dead it can be quite a beautiful one, and that is really quite an interesting way to think about Scorpio. Scorpio is very, very aware of the beauty of life and the beauty of transformation, and that's what we're watching when we enter into autumn. We are witnessing the transformation between the summer months and the joy and the exuberance of watching the sun bless the plants and the foliage around us, and even the people. And some people are out getting their tans, and some people are out just enjoying nature and just watching everything thrive. And then things dip into this darkness and this cooler climate, and everything seems to sort of everything starts to be stripped away again, back to the roots almost, or just like whatever's left standing. So with trees, all the leaves fall off, but the tree may still be standing, and all the branches are still there, but they're bare. So you see the real truth that's exposed after everything falls away. And that's kind of about what Scorpio is about. It's very much a truthful sign. Whether or not they tell you the truth is another thing, because Scorpio isn't necessarily going to be very forthcoming about telling the truth. Scorpio will give you the truth if you really insist on hearing it, but Scorpio they like to guard their true thoughts and feelings, generally because they can be quite cutting and quite straight down the line. Now, speaking of cutting, Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, which is why we might have that little spike on the edge of the glyph of the Scorpio glyph, which has the little M with the little arrow. Now, Mars is in Scorpio, in a passive water sign, is actually going to be a passive expression of Mars. So as opposed to when it's in Aries and it's very courageous and bold and sort of like really trying to get to the first place, trying to get to the goal line as quickly as possible. In Scorpio, it's not going to reveal its plan of action. Aries kind of likes everybody to know what they're aiming for and just goes for it really gung-ho. But in Scorpio, there's definitely a bit more of a strategy and a bit more of a concealed game plan, which is probably why a lot of people call Scorpios manipulative. It's really kind of, it's a bit annoying when that's the first keyword that people go for. A little bit like with Taurus, like, oh, you're stubborn. And with Scorpio, manipulative. I think that it's easy to look at what's probably a bit of a negative trait and make that the thing that you dress them up in every time you speak to them, if you haven't sat down and thought about what that means. And I suppose for Scorpio, manipulation is understanding, having a real understanding of how people work. There's lots of different types of signs that are very in tune with other people, and I have a stellium in Aquarius, and I've always been a bit of a people watcher, but I have a moon in Scorpio, so I also tune in to the the subtle, not, I wouldn't say, yes, there are the subtle nuances that you pick up when you enter a room, and you can feel the kind of the mood and the atmosphere between people. And sometimes you can walk in on something and nobody else picks up on it, but you can pick it up. The person with Scorpio in their chart can just pick up on what's going on. And when they leave, they go to their friend, gosh, did you feel that? Did you get what was going on? And they'll go, no, I didn't notice anything. And the Scorpio will have picked up on practically everything and figured it out in their head what's gone on. So that can be, it's Scorpio has a real gift for tuning in. What's going on here? So Scorpio, Archer. So Scorpio has a real gift for sort of tuning into things and sort of picking up on the nuances and what's going on. And usually people with Scorpio in their chart become very interested in understanding people's motivations and understanding perhaps they're usually very interested in psychology and other people's psychology as well. And often because other people can trigger them in a way, and it can cause them to have a bit of a, they can go around, you can go around blaming other people all you like, but there is a point, as we discussed in Libra, where you have to realise that the people you attract into your life are bringing things out in you. So actually, once you've got through that Libra kind of, if we think about it this way, once you've had Libra who's got into the relationships and absolutely said, yes, let's do this, let's do that, and compromised and kind of, done everything they can to keep the peace, you get to a point where you suddenly say, well, hang on a sec, what about me? How do I make this more about me? How do I redress this kind of imbalance that's kind of presenting itself? And actually, how do I understand why I've allowed this to happen to me? How do I understand? Often I find with Scorpios, they tend to find themselves in situations where there's quite an extreme occurring. So they are an extreme sign. Scorpio is very extreme. There's no sort of middle ground with Scorpio. It's very one end of the scale or the other. So as far as dieting is concerned, a Scorpio may be on a diet where they literally live and breathe this new diet. It could be macrobiotics, and they have to learn about the meticulous details of the diet and all the nutrients they're putting into the body. And they're full on, and they really live and breathe it, and they're really passionate about it. And then they fall off the wagon and they go the complete opposite way, and they slob out, they eat all sorts of junk, and it's just that kind of no middle ground. They can't seem to just do a little bit of it. And that is really the craft of Scorpio, is learning how to live a life of balance in a way, because the extremes can be so destructive. It can be too destructive living your life one way and then switching completely to the opposite. It's almost like binging. And binging, I guess, is a little bit like having an obsession, which Scorpio is also known for, being quite obsessive. So there's a few things about Scorpio there that I thought you'd find quite interesting. And there's so much I can say about Scorpio as well. But I guess we don't have all the time in the world to talk about these things. And, if any of you are interested in learning more about Scorpio, let me know, drop me a message, Stephanie@stelliumastrology.com, and just, we can talk about perhaps doing a workshop or something like that. But do get in touch with me if you're enjoying this. And actually, if you really are enjoying this, take your phone out of your pocket right now if you're listening. And if you're listening on iTunes in particular, if you could just hit me with a star rating, which obviously it'd be lovely if you could give me 5, and just give me a nice little review, just saying what you're enjoying about the podcast. If I've spoken about your chart, tell people how it's resonated, what you really thought of it, and screenshot if you're listening, and hashtag Stellium Astrology on Instagram and @StelliumAstro. Just tag me in it. I really love it when you guys do that, and it just helps me it just gives me the little kick up the bum when I'm flagging some days and I'm just really not in the mood. But yeah, so either way, Scorpio is a sign that is resilient. It's really good in a crisis. They really understand people on a deeper level. Now, what's good about Scorpio is they can really be there for you. They have many good qualities. And they can really give you that emotional support when you're really, really in need. All the fixed signs are very supportive and can be very a kind of a pillar of support for you in tough times. But Scorpio is the one who will go through it with you. If you're going through a crisis, they will go through every aspect of it with you and give you all the emotional support you need. There's something about Scorpio being able to really empathise and really, really be there for people when they're really, really going through things. And again, it could be to do with this sense of crisis, and this kind of experiencing extremes, this kind of thing that Scorpio kind of has to go through extremes in its life. And I think that being there in a crisis, if it's not your own crisis as a Scorpio, if it's somebody else's crisis, you're still experiencing that extreme feeling that you can get. Scorpios, not just Scorpios, but an 8th house or underworld type of thing that we experience when the sun does dip into the underworld, is there can be a recognition of perhaps the darker aspects of humanity and the darker aspects of the human condition. So, as I mentioned before, Scorpio does get lumped with this label of being manipulative. But actually, there can be a real awareness of aspects of the human condition or mindset, in particular things like narcissism, psychopathy, serial killers. There's this whole aspect of understanding when people do go to extremes, or these kind of behaviours that people kind of engage in, like the whole narcissism thing, where there has to be, where a narcissist, and by the way, I'm a Scorpio moon, so I'm really interested in all this stuff, but when a narcissist, you encounter somebody like that in your life, and it takes you a while to figure out this puzzle of a person who constantly leaves you scratching your head, and you don't understand why. Why are they behaving this way? This is usually what prompts a Scorpio. This is usually what prompts a Scorpio to dig deeper. And when they find subjects like narcissism, psychopathy, sociopathy, and get into like serial killer documentaries, mysteries and things like that, it really fires them up, because there's something about the mysteries and the unseen with Scorpio. So they're usually interested in often things like astrology or mystery subjects where you don't know the origin, like stone circles, for example. We don't really know the origin. We can talk about what we think the origin is, but there's no real evidence that tells us how the stones were moved, where they were moved, why they really put them there, who really put them there, how they carved them, how they lifted these massive, like the dolmens in Stonehenge, the 2 slabs with one sitting on the top of it. How on earth did they move that stuff? The pyramids, this is very Scorpio areas of interest. And with a Scorpio, there's almost a scratching an itch and constantly needing to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And so they're considered to be a very deep sign. So I know, right, so my grandmother is 95. She just turned 95. As I record this, it was yesterday. She had her 95th birthday. She's a Scorpio, and she has been committed to her husband, who passed away. He passed away about 38 years ago, and she's always been totally dedicated to him. This is that kind of commitment that you get with Scorpio, that they really love, and the love is kind of until death do us part, which is a bit of a Scorpio line that you might get in some wedding vows. And like I've said before, I don't know if I've said it in this podcast, but definitely with some of my students and some of my clients, when you've got the love and the romance and the beauty of Libra, often weddings are associated with the 7th house and Libra, but actually I also think that weddings can be connected very much with Scorpio, because you have to sign a contract when you get married, and the contract is a bond. It's a thing that connects you. It's that, if you think about the fact that fixed water freezes, and whatever you put in ice, okay, here's a good example. Have you ever heard of that tip when they say try not to overspend on your credit and debit cards? If you know you're that way inclined, put your debit cards and credit cards into a pot with water and stick it in the freezer, and the next time you want to buy something, you'll have to defrost it before you can spend that money. And that is kind of that state of keeping you in suspense and having to wait patiently before you can take any further action, because that Scorpio ice cube kind of stops you from acting so quickly. And it also contains everything, every intention that was there when it was frozen. So while those credit and debit cards are defrosting, you're sitting there going, oh, but I suppose I don't really need that thing. And by the time it's probably defrosted, you've managed to talk yourself out of it, unless, of course, it is something you absolutely love and you know it's worth getting into your overdraft over. But again, that's another Scorpio thing, overdrafts. And basically the sign Scorpio is associated with sex, death, rebirth and birth and rebirth, and that kind of what do you call it? That is all of the things in life we don't really want to talk about. It's generally the stuff we tend to want to avoid talking about, and it's usually the stuff that isn't really dinner party conversation. You know when you've got a Scorpio at your dinner party, because they'll be talking about all these things, and they'll be talking about mortgages, insurance, things where you have to borrow other people's money. Sometimes when you've got a middleman that has to get involved. So Scorpio is usually, if you're having a dinner party, you want to have somebody there who's quite chatty and fun and light-hearted. Gemini, Sagittarius are usually quite good ones to have in those situations. A Scorpio will really make it quite intense and quite, the conversation can get quite heavy for some people. Now, just on the subject of death, birth and rebirth and that kind of thing, there is this amazing power of creativity that you get with Scorpio, and a real understanding of transformation. And as we talked about, the leaves changing colour in the autumn and the awareness of death, there is also a knowledge. There's almost this sense of the phoenix rising from the ashes with Scorpio season, and that itself is a very it's an understanding that sometimes we have to be stripped back in order to grow again out of the ashes. A little bit like 2020, a little bit like this really, really, really insane year for us to all be living through. One of the planets which was involved in that big stellium that's caused everything that it has is Pluto, which is the ruler of Scorpio, the modern ruler of Scorpio. And, it was the country, the world was stripped back to people who were key workers or essential workers. And that's what Pluto transit can do. That's what Scorpio can do. Get stripped back to the essentials. Like I said, the leaves falling off of the trees, and what's standing is like literally the essence and the core of whatever it is was there before. And then there's a chance to start again, and do things differently and learn from mistakes of the past and do things bigger and better and more efficiently, more productively. So that can be, 2020 and what we're going through this. It's almost like we've gone through this bottleneck, and then through the bottleneck we've had to be reborn into this kind of scary, vulnerable place where we were really uncertain about what was going on. And through that uncertainty, we've created new systems to survive. And through those new systems, we're finding new ways of living, new normal, which I hate. But it's true, this is just what's happening. And Pluto was a big part of that. And that brings a very Scorpio feel to this year. So, like I said, crisis, survival, that's all to do with Scorpio. And if you're somebody with a Scorpio sun, moon, ascendant, or even any of the other planets in Scorpio, you're probably going to identify with this in some way or another. So the person I wanted to talk about, one of my subscribers that I wanted to talk about, and if you'd like to have your chart discussed, all you have to do is go to stelliumastrology.com. There's a little tab in the menu called subscribe, and if you click on that, you can fill out the little form and an email will be sent to you. It's literally just sign up to the mailing list, and then an email will be sent to you with a link to the podcast application form. And if you don't receive that email, it's possibly because it's gone into the spam or the junk folder, which it does do sometimes. So if you do sign up to my mailing list, do check your spam or junk folder, because my emails could have found their way into that area, the very Scorpio part of the inbox, actually. So the person I wanted to talk about today was Laura. Laura has subscribed, and her birth time, she says, is around 11:30. She is not entirely sure, but I know Laura, and I think that her chart is right. So Laura is a Scorpio Sun, Pluto, Saturn and Mercury in all of them in Scorpio. So she's got a lot of Scorpio in her chart. So her Sun is in conjunction, slightly wide, but it's there, with Pluto, which is the modern ruling planet of Scorpio. And she also has Mars, the traditional ruler of Scorpio, in her first house. So she's got Capricorn rising and she has Moon in Aquarius, but she has all of that stuff in Scorpio. So having Mars in her first house gives her a little bit more of a connection with all of that Scorpio stuff in her whole outlook and way of being. So I know that obviously having Sun and Pluto in Scorpio is going to be pretty big anyway. But also having Mars in the first house is going to, you'd think that it would bring an element of competitiveness and, give it a bit of an Aries flavour. But with a Scorpio Sun being there, there's definitely a sense of it being a much more passive, and again, her Mars is in a passive earth sign in Capricorn. So it's not going to be like Aries. It's going to be a bit different. So it's going to be much more playing down that Mars, which is constantly finding its way around somewhere. It's much more of like Scorpio, you can almost see it as the sign of the submarine. It's the sign, it's submerged. You don't really see much of Scorpio other than maybe the little telescope that sticks out from underneath the water looking around. Or perhaps we can look at it as the ice cube. You've got the ice cube, an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg showing, but underneath you've got this huge, huge amount of ice. And that's the stuff that Scorpio doesn't show you. And perhaps that's the case with Laura, because Laura is quite a private person. She's got her stellium, her Scorpio stellium falls in her 11th house, which means that friendships and communities are very important to her. And I know that she has got a lot of really great friends. I say maybe a handful of really, really trusted friends, but she's, quite a popular person. And that's another thing about Scorpio. They can be very private. Like I said, there can be that submarine aspect where they do have a lot going on under the surface that you don't really know about. But yeah, having a Sun-Pluto conjunction is immediately going to be somebody who what they end up doing in life, what they're growing towards, is becoming somebody who really understands how to deal with that kind of underworld aspect. Pluto, also known as Hades, is, the lord of the underworld. So having her Sun in conjunction with the modern ruler of Scorpio and, the lord of the underworld is somebody who has to journey into the underworld. This is part of who they are. So they're going to be interested in things that, with Scorpio, it's not a sign that takes things at face value. So they're not always going to, if somebody says, this is the sign of the conspiracy theorist. This is somebody who, is told everything's okay, keep calm, carry on. They're going to say, well, it doesn't seem right to me, it doesn't feel right to me, and I'm going to trust my instinct on this, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. That's what Scorpio would do. Having a Sun-Pluto conjunction, this makes them somebody who's probably experienced crisis in their life more than once. In fact, they're adept at dealing with crisis. Now, I do know that Laura lost her father at quite a young age. I think she was still in her teens when she lost her father. I think she was in her teens. She also lost her mother a few years back as well. And so usually Scorpio has been in contact with death in some way or another. They understand death. They have a relationship with death because they've had to work through what death really is. And, it's that kind of sense of going through, there's something called the loss curve in counselling and psychotherapy, where somebody has to kind of experience the highs and lows of loss. And this is something that it's a process that you'll recognise if you've had to go through any kind of, even if it's a breakup, if it's you've lost, somebody's passed away that you love, even if you've lost a job, something that created great, really disrupted your life in some way and caused you to address a sense of loss or a sense of void in yourself. And often there's these 7 stages of grief which you can go through, which I can't list them all off the top of my head, but you go through a sense of like bargaining and denial and then anger. There's all these different ones. And sometimes, reaching the other side when you get to acceptance, which is often all you can do when you deal with grief, is accept at the end of the day that something happened. You can't necessarily resolve those wounds, but you can accept that it's happened and learn to live with it. And that is kind of, I guess, when I look at a chart like this, or anybody who's kind of got a strong contact with Scorpio, they have to deal with that tumultuous experience that creates that process within you, where you kind of have to address and accept certain things in life that, are part of life. We all have to go through them, but, it's not easy. And so, yes, I would say that this is a chart. Sometimes you can look at a chart and say, wow, that's really intense. It looks challenging. It doesn't look easy. There are some things in this chart that I think look great. Jupiter in Capricorn, and Mars in there in the first house as well. This is a very adventurous person. And an Aquarius moon is always going to be unconventional. So adventurous, unconventional, and Stellium in Sagittarius as well, this chart has, which kind of indicates that there's a real spiritual aspect, or a kind of, leaning towards understanding things on a deeper, or a bigger, in the context of the bigger picture. So actually, this is somebody who may have gone through some very deep, dark things in their life. And they've perhaps got their essential friends who have been through everything with them and really have stood by them through thick and thin, and the ones that really revealed themselves in a crisis. But ultimately, this is somebody who really has a good understanding of the why we go through these. So they may have been through the darkness into the underworld, but they've gone back up to a higher level and said, okay, I can see that every aspect of what I've been through is kind of part of one massive jigsaw puzzle, and I'm just one little piece in that jigsaw puzzle, and I can see how I fit in. I might not like it. It might make me feel a little bit insignificant sometimes, but actually my power is through understanding my ability to control how I feel about it, by accepting that sometimes I can't control that. So that is the Scorpio chart. Laura, I'm sure you relate, but if you do, I'd love you to get in touch with me and tell me. Email me, stephanie@stelliumastrology.com. You can send me a message on Instagram. I'm there. Usually I pick up those messages more than anything else, though I have been a little bit offline over Scorpio season. If you wouldn't mind writing me a review, that would also be really great. Now, I know there's lots of people with Scorpio in their charts that listen to this podcast, but I picked Laura because she has got that stellium, and I decided to pick a couple of celebrities. One celebrity who has got a C Rodden rating. Now, if you don't know what that is, the Rodden rating, go back and listen to the astro.com episode, creating a free birth chart, free astrology software, because that explains what the Rodden ratings are. But C is not as trustworthy. And this is Björk. I picked Björk, an Icelandic pop singer from the 90s who is full on wacky. And she has got Sun, Neptune and Moon rising in Scorpio. So she was born on a new moon. Neptune's involved, which is automatically going to give her that creative, dreamy, glamorous kind of edge. In Scorpio, it's going to have that dark glamour about it. It's going to be a little bit Tim Burton almost. And on the midheaven, she's also got Pluto that rules Scorpio in conjunction with Uranus, which is the quirky, unconventional planet sitting up there. She's one of that generation, that Pluto-Uranus generation in Virgo, which I talked about. A few listeners have got that signature in their chart. And I picked Bjork because she is just, her music is haunting. Like, it's really quirky, original, and she's very intense. She said sometimes she's sitting on the train and just the train tracks, the noise that it's making, it's almost like music in her head, and then she's writing a song. She's truly creative, and I think Scorpio is an incredibly creative sign. And I picked her just because I thought that she's a great one to look at as a Scorpio, just to kind of understand that that kind of magnetism that Scorpio has. It has a similar magnetism to Aries, but all of the fixed signs have a type of magnetism which is almost definitely with Scorpio. It's like, it feels like the forbidden fruit when you're looking into their eyes. They have this thing about them, or somebody with Sun Pluto, they draw you in. It's like hypnosis. But yes, so Bjork's a great one to look at. Her chart is interesting to look at. She's a very interesting person. You might remember that she had somebody come up to her at an airport once and tried to take photos of her children, and she went into a full-blown rage and attacked the paparazzi who was trying to get images of her. And this is maybe a little hint towards the kind of rage that can be bubbling under the surface of Scorpio. And, if when they have to go into being protective, they will really be protective. So she revealed a bit of herself, a bit more than she wanted to. She didn't really want to reveal her cards too soon, but she did. And another Scorpio that I've got is another stellium: Sun, Pluto, Mercury, Moon and Saturn rising in Scorpio. So that's a massive amount of Scorpio in the chart. Is Katy Perry. And I just chose Katy Perry because of that amount of Scorpio anyway. It's just huge. She is, I'll add her chart to the links when I make the episode post. But I chose her because Katy Perry has all of these planets sitting on her ascendant, and the ascendant is kind of our image, the way we kind of present ourselves to the world. And she seems to have quite a changing appearance. She's constantly going through transformations. Her most recent transformation is that she's having a baby, or had a baby. I'm not sure if she's had it yet. But that's another transformative process. And it wouldn't surprise me if having a child is going to be a very profound experience. Not like it isn't for every woman, but I think that it will have a very visibly profound effect on Katy Perry. And I think that we may see that her motherhood journey becomes very much part of who she is and what she has to say about herself. Definitely having a moon Mercury rising in Scorpio, there is definitely a sense that she will be communicating aspects of her moon, which is the journey of being a mother, through everything that she does, the way she dresses herself, the way she presents herself to the world. But yes, I don't know too much about her backstory, other than that I think her parents were quite religious. I think maybe her father was a pastor. I think Christians, at least. Yes, Pentecostal pastors, it says here. And they turned to God after having a wild youth, both of her parents. And Katie has kind of upset that aspect of the family because, she's been so controversial, and she has done things like releasing a song like I Kissed a Girl and things like that just, aren't necessarily, I'm not saying that all Christians are like, anti, homosexuality or anything like that, but it's definitely not something that they want you to be wearing sexuality on your sleeve and really telling everybody about it. And particularly not dancing around in skimpy little outfits with cupcakes on, like a cupcake bra top, and squirting cream out of your boobs, which Katy Perry has done. I guess it's just a bit too sexy. And that's the thing, Scorpios can be quite sexy. So that's kind of it. There's so much more you can cover with each of the signs. Like I've said, we can cover huge amounts with the signs of the zodiac. However, I can't talk forever about this because I need to get on with my life. I actually need to do other things, and I don't want to bore you guys, and I think that having long episodes can be quite boring. So thank you to Laura for submitting your chart, and I hope you enjoy exploring Scorpio for yourself. If you recognise Scorpio in yourself, definitely let me know. If you have a friend who's a Scorpio who you think would really relate to this and would actually quite like hearing stuff about themselves that isn't negative, then, definitely share this with them and get them to listen. And I am looking forward to speaking to you next time about Sagittarius, who I know a bit about Sagittarius because I've been mingling with a few of them for the past few years. I grew up with one. And they can be quite infuriating sometimes because they say whatever is on their mind without putting it through a filter. #NoFilter Sagittarius. They can exaggerate like mad, but they come from a really, really good place usually, and they're often really quite sweet people. So I'm looking forward to talking about our sweet but slightly foot and mouth syndrome sign of the zodiac, Sagittarius. So thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. And like I said, if you'd like to be featured, just sign up to the mailing list and fill out the form, and I'll get you on the show at some point. Thanks to everybody who's already applied. I'm working through it. There's quite a lot. And I'm looking forward to exploring many more shows with you guys. Happy Thanksgiving. Take care. Bye now.